This is the Creative Market Free Goods Roundup for the week of September 14th, 2015. There are 6 different free goods this week, but they are free this week only. So if you see something you like when you watch this video, just check out the description of this video where I will place links to each one of these 6 different free items. So first up here is Rude Cookie Font. So this font is provided in OpenType font format, and there's also a bonus, and I'll go to that right now. So this bonus is a bunch of swirling elements that happens to work very nicely with the font that's included. And I'll zoom out a little bit so you can see the full thing right here. So it works really well as, like, let's say the front end of a business card or a greeting card, or even if you have something like a restaurant menu that's going to be shown in landscape, something like this could be pretty cool for that as well. And you could of course feel free to add this onto a textured background of some sorts or add a color behind it. But this is part of the download with this font, so you can use this as you see fit, or just use small parts of it if you want to kind of deconstruct this and rebuild it into something slightly different looking. So here I have the font opened up, and as you can tell, there's a lot of stuff in here, and the reason for that is there are 5 different types of fonts when you actually download this particular font. So this is a very complete font family. So this one right here at the top is called Rude Cookie Block. This one is the brush version. The one below that, I'll zoom in a little bit closer so you can see the brush right here. This one right here is Rude Cookie Front. So if you want to add a shadow behind your letters, you can just duplicate this font behind, like let's say this version right here, to go and add that drop shadow look to your font. And below that we have a hatched line version called Garrus. And below that we have sort of a mixture of all the above right here called Quick, which is probably called Quick because it's just a quicker way of making these different bordered shadows and crosshatches apply to the font without going in there and layering everything yourself. So I'll quickly go over the main one right here, which is the block version. If I zoom in close on these letters, they have a pretty interesting roughened texture to them to give them a little bit more of a vintage flair. And below that we have the uppercase letters. I'll very quickly go through these so you can tell they do include all those as well, and they work very nicely with the lowercase variants. And each one of these different weighted fonts, as you can see on the left right here, and then on the right here, have lowercase as well as uppercase versions. So that is all fully covered. And they do include all the numbers 0 through 9, as well as all the different special characters that you would come to expect. If I go to type and then glyphs right here, you can see everything that's included. So at the bottom here, you can tell they do include a bunch of different accented letter types for languages that are not English. So you should be covered if you're using a Latin-based language of some sort with this font. And right here, I typed up Free Goods Roundup. This one right here is in the block version. So you can see how this one looks. And below that, we have, the script version, which is called Brush. And then the one below that is the quick version, which is the completed version of all the different fonts kind of combined together to make a word. So the stock kerning is relatively good. It will need some cleaning up. Like if you look at the word goods right here, by default this is a little bit loose and kind of a little bit sloppy, so you'd want to clean this up if you're using this on a headline, something like that, but it should be pretty quick to go in there and do something like that. The script version though looks very solid with the stock kerning. I don't see anything that really stands out as odd. And with the quick version, you might want to tie up a few of these letters to be a little bit closer, but I actually think it looks a little bit better than this version up top here, the block version, by default, but certainly go in there and clean up letters as you see fit. And the stock space in between the words looks perfect to me. So that's it for this font. There are 5 different versions of this font included in this set, so it is a really complete font family. So if you're looking to design a very vintage inspired piece that has a bunch of different styles of fonts in it, but you want them all to be extremely consistent and be part of a family, then this is a really cool set to pick up for that reason. So if you like what you see right here and you want to grab it for free, just be sure to download it this week. Next up here is Branding Mockup Stationery. So this is a really huge kit of mockups for Photoshop. So I'm going to go over this pretty quickly because there's just so much to show. But I highly recommend, if you like what you see right here, you download the pack and check out everything, because there is a lot to check out and figure out what you want to use. So this file is called All, and it has basically everything that's included in the pack here. So there's a lot of really high resolution mockups of all sorts of different things, from things like an iPad and a mouse to pens, staplers, different kinds of stationery. There's really a huge variety of stuff to go in here and use. And the quality is also very good. If I zoom into this at, let's see, 100% once I get there. So this is 100%. So everything is very crisp at this level. And it does seem that this is very focused on web mockups, or showing things on the web, but you might be able to get away with using these in print if you're willing to show them a little bit smaller. So that really covers the basis of this first page. As you can tell, there's a ton of stuff here to go in and use. And I'll quickly show you how these work. So each of these different items in this all page is on its own folder. So if I turn on and off this folder labeled 35, you can tell it is this right down here that looks sort of like a smaller piece of paper, almost like a napkin. And how you edit these is you just double click on the smart object at the top here, which will bring you into a window. So these have examples in them by default, but you can just bring your own work in here. You can go to File and then Place Embedded or Place Linked, however you want to do it, and drop your own file in here. And once you do that, I'm moving this just a little bit so that it should update when I save it. just hit Control S on a PC or Command S on a Mac to save this smart object window. Once it's done saving, you can go ahead and close it. And as you can tell, it went ahead and updated this mockup with my new position of this item. So you can of course swap out all these items and place your own stuff in there and mock up whatever it is that you want to show. So there are also these different mock-up kind of pre-made layouts for different stuff right here. So this is for a coffee shop. So they do have some very specific uses for different mock-up and mock-up situations, kind of depending on what you want to show off. So it's nice that they have these little bonuses in here that are very nicely laid out and quite professional looking. So like, let's say you're an architect and you want to show off your branding. This might be a perfect way of doing that with this particular layout. And here's the last ones of these kind of pre-made little mock-ups right here. And there's also some different branding layouts. So if you want to show off a logo to a client and how it might look on different devices or objects, in this case, business cards, an iPad, and iPhone, this one is made for you. And there are a few more of these as well that have some even more stuff. So this one's clearly focused on perhaps a musician or let's say a film company if you want to show off like a DVD, something like that. And you can of course turn on or off these folders and just move stuff around as you see fit to customize how these pre-made layouts look. So here's the last one that should be good for a branding agency or a creative group of some sort. And like I said before, you can turn on or off these layers and move them around. All the folders here are labeled by numbers, but you can feel free to double click on those and rename them. So this could be business card or something like that, and then resave this file if you want them to be a little bit easier to go in there and navigate in the future. But this is really a ridiculously huge kit of different mockups to pull and use. So if you need mockups at all, this one is probably worth checking out just to get at least something useful out of it. There's so much stuff here that it should have a whole bunch of different possible use scenarios covered. So if you think this one is cool and it might be useful for you, just be sure to pick it up this week. Next up is Shy Guy Texture Pack. This texture pack is provided in Illustrator format, so I have it opened up inside Illustrator here to show it. And as you can see right here, there are a ton of different vector textures to go in here and use. So if you open up this file and it's a little bit slow, that's probably not all that unexpected because there are so many very detailed textures in here to go in and use. So my suggestion is when you're actually finding textures to use on a project, just find that texture and then hit Control-C or Command-C to copy it, and then open up a new document and place it in there before you really get started, as this one might slow down quite a bit. But I'll zoom in very closely on some of these right here so you can kind of get a good idea of all these different textures. So ones like this have just a few very sparse textures, and I'm assuming all these textures were created by using a sponge or something like that. So if you're ever wanting to make your own textures, placing paint on a sponge and then dabbing it on a piece of paper and scanning it in will give you results fairly similar to this, and then you can bring it into a program like Illustrator and vectorize it to make your own textures. But in this case, all that work's been done for you, so you don't have to deal with the mess. And as you can see right here, there's a nice variety of textures. If I zoom in really close here, you can see how these individual dot elements look. So when you're really up close, they're extremely geometric looking, but as you zoom out a little bit further, they become much more natural and organic in their appearance. So I'll keep on going down here and show all the textures very quickly. And there are some different versions, like this is probably a sponge that was dragged a little bit to create this kind of interesting linear pattern right there. And sometimes if you get a bit more paint on the sponge than the other ones, you'll get heavier texture areas as shown right here. And I'll just keep on going down here because there's so many textures here to cover that I'd really recommend, if you like what you see, you should probably pick up this pack and zoom in on everything close yourself and kind of get a good feel of what to expect with this pack. But here is the final line. So this texture right here is very similar to the ones above, but some of these right here are much heavier. There's a lot more texture going on, so perhaps extra amounts of paint or ink were used on some of these textures to create these interesting looks right here. And this right here is probably the most aggressive texture of them all. So if I zoom in kind of close right here, you can get a good idea of how this one looks. And as you can see right here, my Illustrator is a little bit choppy because there's so much going on. Like if I click on this, there's so many points right here that it kind of slows down your system a bit. So that's why I was saying, if you find a texture you really like, perhaps drag it off into its own document and then close this one so your computer's performance can speed up that little bit more. But that's it for this texture pack. There is a ton of stuff to go in here and pick from and use. So if you liked what you saw this far, this is a pack that I'd certainly recommend that you download and check everything out for yourself and kind of figure out what you'll find most useful. Next up, we have Bottler Design Kit. These files are provided in both EPS as well as Illustrator file formats, and I have the Illustrator files opened up inside Illustrator here to show them. And there's a few different files in here. There's Bottler Clean shown right here, so if I zoom in on these different bottle elements, you can tell they don't have textures knocked out of them. There's another one called Bottler Textured, so if I zoom in on these bottles, you can tell there's been a texture knocked out of the inside of the bottles to give them a little bit more of a vintage or worn look. And then there's a third file, which is kind of a bonus, that has 3 different textures. Most likely these are created by sponges and then vectorized. So that's kind of a cool little bonus in here if you want to have some additional vector textures. They look pretty solid in my opinion. I'm not going to cover these a whole bunch, since I think just looking at them pretty quickly you can get a good idea if you think you'll find these textures useful for you or not. But they look pretty solid in the execution of them. If I zoom in really close here Everything looks pretty nice and rounded and nice and varied as well, so these are pretty darn good textures in my book. So I'll just show these on the textured version, and as far as the other version, it's the exact same as these, just there's no texture knocked out inside the actual bottles. So there are a few different bordered elements right here in the left-hand section of this page. They look like vintage starbursts, so if you think you'll have use for those are on the left-hand side. And then we get into the actual bottles right here, so all the type on these can be changed. I have to update this type quick. But once you do that, you can change this type to be whatever it is you need it to be, and it should automatically go on the right path too, so it looks like it's following the contour of these built-in banners right here. And I think the illustration style is handled really well, and actually the banners also have a very cool style if you look at how this banner looks. So kind of keep that in mind as well, that there are some really nice banners here, but if I click on this, you can tell the banner is part of the bottle itself, so it wouldn't be easy, at least, to pull the banner off the bottle, but if you have a bit of time, you certainly could do that. It just requires quite a bit of custom work, or maybe bring it into Photoshop and just erase stuff out, whatever happens to be fastest for you. So I'm going to go down to the bottom section of bottles right here, and as you can tell, there's a lot of different looks of bottles, so there is quite a bit of versatility, or variety at least, of these different bottles for you to go in and use. And you could of course change out all the type as far as what fonts are being used if you want to use different fonts. I think it should be super easy for you to go in there and do that if that's something that you want to do. But that's really it for this kit. Remember, there is also a version where the interior of these bottles isn't knocked out, but since the designs are all the same, I didn't feel a need to go over that separately. And there is also the 3 extra bonus textures included in the other file. So if you like these bottle designs and you might have some use for those either now or in the future, just be sure to grab it this week while it's still free. Next up is Calm, a responsive WordPress theme. This is a fully responsive theme for WordPress, so if you're a fan of the WordPress content management system, this is definitely a theme worth checking out. And it is based around the idea of a portfolio, although if you're using it as a blog, it could also work very nicely as that, as it's shown right here. If you click on one of these posts, it'll bring you to that page, and all the different pages that you click on have these animations as you go to them. So if I click the About section, for example, you can see the page transitions in with that kind of neat transition. And on the left here is all the navigation as well as social media, and in the very top left there's a sidebar, which when you click that, it takes you to recent posts, comments, or search. So that's kind of an interesting way of making that work. And this is how the About section looks, so room for a picture and then plenty of room for type about yourself. If I go to the Portfolio section, it brings up a bunch of different images here with the top navigation of a way to differentiate all the categories of things right here. It just kind of blanks out the ones that aren't part of that category. But if you select all, you can see everything. And if you click on an individual item, it'll bring you to that item's page with room for a picture as well as lots of type. And in this case, a launch button that could take you to that website or that client's project page, whatever the case may be for that. If I go to contact here, it'll load up the contact page with a simple name, email, subject, and message form. So pretty simple and to the point right there. But that's it for this theme. It's a pretty solid theme with lots of different animations and kind of interesting functionality when pages load up. So if you liked how all of that looked, this might be kind of an interesting theme to kind of dig into and see if you can make it work for you. So if you think you might have use for this theme, just be sure to pick it up this week while it's still free. And last up is logo elements. The file formats for these elements are provided in EPS, Illustrator, Photoshop, as well as PNG. So I have the Illustrator file opened up in Illustrator here to show it because that's a really easy way to go ahead and do it. But go ahead and use any of those different file formats as you see fit for whatever works best for you. So this is a pretty large pack of different elements right here to go in and use. So if you're looking for some pre-made elements to kind of put into your designs and perhaps build upon and use and further expand upon, then this is a really good set to check out for that reason, as there's stuff from banners to shields to bordering or framing elements, a pretty decent selection of different stuff here to pick from. And right here we have some more iconic stuff as well as different leaves and stuff like that. So this covers not only framing and borders and just general badge style layouts, but then there's stuff at the bottom here that you can go ahead and add to those to really make a more complete design as you see fit. So I'll just quickly go through here to the final few things. At the bottom here we have a few different facial silhouettes in a fairly vintage style, like this one right here looks almost like a 1960s Barbie, and then a whole bunch of different arrows, as well as some pretty nice little framing border elements at the very bottom here that you could add some custom type into. Like something like this one right here would work really well as a label on a canned good or anything along those lines. You could really expand upon that and make this part of a much larger, much fuller design. But that's it for this pack. As you see, there's a lot of different things to go in here and use, and if you choose to use either the EPS or Illustrator, they're vectors, so you can make them as big or as small as you want. So it is nice that there's that level of flexibility with these. So if these look cool to you and you think you might have some use for them, just be sure to pick them up this week. So that's it for this week's free goods, and do remember they are free this week only. So if you saw something you might have use for, just check out the description of this video where you will find a link to download it. And as always, if you found this video helpful, please like and favorite. And if you want to see this video every week, please subscribe. This video is released every Monday, so you know it's free this week on Creative Market. Thank you for watching.